2020 meeting of the Bellingham Planning Board. Jim, do we need to add everything outlined requirements based on Governor Baker, or can we skip that?
Yeah, we're in good shape at this point.
Okay. First item on the agenda is the continuation of the public hearing for Red Mill Definitive Plan zoning bylaws. Jim, what's the status on that?
Yep, so the applicant has requested a continuation to September 10th. That's mostly regarding my request that we try and sync up our process with conservation as we typically like to do. They're not opening their hearing until late August. So rather than get 5 steps ahead, I thought it would be prudent to take hit the brakes for a moment, let them start revising their plan accordingly, and get a chance to be in front of conservation. So they're looking for a continuation to the September 10th meeting.
Do I have a motion or discussion on the floor?
I'll move to continue the hearing to the September 10th meeting. Second.
Do I have a second? All those in favor of continuing Red Mill Definitive Plan until September 10th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Jim, what's the next item?
All right, the next item on the agenda is our Bellingham Shores Major Residential Development Special Permit, Definitive Subdivision, and Stormwater Management Plan continued hearing. Just so you know, so you have the most up-to-date plans right in front of you. These came in Friday, and Amy stamped them in on Tuesday for you. So there is some additional changes from the previous plans that were sent out. Sean Malone is online here with us, as well as Attorney Jeff Roloffs, who I'm sure can go over the details of the updates.
Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and everyone. Good to see you all. What I'd like to do is to just give a brief presentation overview of the materials that were submitted. And just to recap, since we had our last real discussion on this project, we had 2 submittals. We submitted some materials on June 9th, and then the additional materials August 5th that Jim was just referencing. So if I can I share my screen briefly? All
Yep,
right.
you should be good to go.
Okay. Where are we? Okay, everybody still with me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. So, like I said, what I'd just like to give a brief overview, and then I'd like to ask the board if there's any particular plans that they want me to bring up to go over. I didn't incorporate them into this slideshow because it's hard to zoom and all that, so I figured it'd be easier to look at those independently as needed. So on June 9th, we submitted some revised site plans. This included layout changes to increase the buffer behind the properties along Center Street to an 85-foot buffer. And in the areas where we have less than 100 foot of buffer between the project and abutting properties, we also added a fence to prevent any encroachment beyond the buffer, beyond the property lines. Per request of the Conservation Commission, we also brought the roadway around the east side of the site, the loop, down into the site more, making it a little more condensed in order to remove any grading from individual house lots from the buffer zone. The Conservation Commission has confirmed and endorsed this change. We extended the cross street sidewalk to all the way to the paved parking lot adjacent to Silver Lake, just beyond the pump station that's down there. And we've also added the buffer impacts associated with the cross street sidewalk, which are on our site. As a result, we've also increased the wetlands mitigation area that we have and added construction notes. So the mitigation area now incorporates the wetlands fill that would be required for the sidewalk construction. We were asked by the board to submit some typical anticipated house plans. We submitted 5 typical market rate styles. These houses are anticipated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 square feet each. We also submitted 4 smaller house styles. These would be for some of the smaller lots in the project, as well as affordable units. And these are anticipated to be between 1,500 feet and 2,000 square feet. We had previous.
Bring that up so the public can see the plans.
The house plans? Sure.
Please.
Let's see here. 1 second. So the first ones I'll show here, these are the typical market rate plans, again, between about 2,500 square feet and 3,000 square feet. We have some varying roof lines, varying side garage versus front garage. There are different floor plans. And these can also be adapted and customized as a buyer would like. Some include first floor masters, which I think the board had also requested, which would be more of an accessible type unit. These homes here are the smaller units, the 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. And again, the varying floor plans and facades, some are longer and more narrow, some are wider, which can all be adapted to fit different sites. And again, these can be customized as a buyer may like. And this one here, again, is one of the smaller units that has a first floor bedroom as well. If I may, I just want to go through the bullets.
Sure can.
And please, just as you just did, please stop me if you want to look at anything or go back to see anything. Please just give a shout out. One thing we had talked about previously is looking at providing affordables offsite rather than onsite. And in discussing this with Jim, we understand that there's a separate inclusionary housing special permit process that we'll be going through. And so we anticipate that'll be a focus of that discussion in the future. We submitted a soil management plan. This was developed to specify the procedures for importing and managing materials onto the site, as well as the associated truck traffic. One of the things that we do have in this plan, aside from hours of operations, et cetera, is a stipulation that there will be no construction vehicle access from Cross Street. And I also addressed that in the revised phasing plan that I'll get to in just a little bit. We were asked to look at potential school enrollments from this project. We consulted several sources, including the Mass Department of Education, the U.S. Census, and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And what we found from the Department of Education and the Census is Bellingham has an enrollment rate of approximately 0.3 pupils per household in town. So using that calculation, we could expect about 38 students K through 12 to be coming from Bellingham Shores. We also found this document from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council from 2017 that I found interesting, that indicated that throughout the state, generally towns have been seeing a decrease in school enrollment, and enrollment is not necessarily a function of residential development. They had a ending quote in their document: the permits don't produce the pupils. So we actually submitted that document as well for the board's information. We had some discussion last meeting about traffic, and particularly the use of Cross Street. Some board members felt that the cross street was, traffic was being underestimated, and also asked us to look at the intersections from Cross Street out to Prospect Street. So we have gone ahead and done that. Kim from TEP LLC has revised the traffic distribution to more heavily rely on Cross Street for vehicles anticipated to be using 495 for commuter traffic, etc. He reviewed the crash data and the sight lines for the intersections of Cross Street all the way to Prospect Street, and found that there was really no significant crashes and sight lines were sufficient. There was, I think one board member had mentioned the looking left, I believe, as you're coming on Cross Street, entering Prospect Street, some obstruction. And Kim found that there was room to improve those sight lines. However, that area is in Franklin and it's on a scenic road. So that would really be up to the town of Franklin to be able to allow that work. And what it seemed like was a mound. Maybe the road had been readjusted and regraded over years and they left the mound there. So his conclusion was that even with this additional traffic being allocated to Cross Street, there was still no significant impacts to the traffic safety or operations from this project. I'm going to move on to our August 5th submittal. And what this primarily comprised of is just the full revised site plan set. We revised all of the roadway profiles and the drainage system based on the layout changes that I discussed previously. We were asked by the Conservation Commission to see what we could do to lessen the impacts and reduce the size of Basin 1, which is the large basin in the center of the site. So we were able to reduce that some, reduce the grading and the slopes of the berms associated with that, and also remove most of that basin from the buffer zones. We revised the phasing plan to include a haul road from the Center Street construction area, the phase 1, if you would, to the area that's currently being used to stockpile material, which would be used for this project, which is over by South Main Street. We also included a note requiring phase stabilization and inspection by the town prior to beginning a subsequent phase, and added a haul road from the Center Street entrance that we are going to use for a sewer easement into the phase 1 area, again, so we don't have to use Cross Street for any construction vehicle. We added some open space associated with the reduced size of Basin 1, as well as separating out an area that would be deeded separately to the town for the town's use for a municipal stormwater basin behind Douglas Drive. And that came from a request, I believe, from Don DiMartino. We got a plan from Jim and overlaid that on our site plan to be able to carve out a piece of that space that could be used for that if the town decided to do so. The remainder of the open space would be granted to the Conservation Commission. Last night, they mentioned that they may not be interested in the triangle parcel, the parcel directly next to Silver Lake. So we're waiting to hear back from them on exactly what they'd like to do, and if they choose not to take ownership of that land, that would just have a conservation restriction on it, so it couldn't be developed. And then the last portion of the submittal was revised full stormwater study. This is based on the new layout and revisions to Basin 1. And the result remains that there's no increase in stormwater discharge from the site. So with that, that's it for what I have to present as an overview, and be glad to look at any or all of these in more detail as the board desires.
I believe we're gonna have some questions. Jim, do you have any comments, first of all?
Yeah, there was a few things, but I'll go after the board goes.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for making the changes that we made. With regard to, there are a couple of things, I guess. I have a question about the buffer, the open space, and some tree planting. The buffer, can you tell me where or what lots do not have the 100-foot buffer?
Yes. So that would be in this area here behind 66, 67, and 68. There's a reduced 75-foot buffer. So in this area, we are incorporating the fence, as well as this is an area that's not really all that vegetated or treed right now. So we'd restore this area with some enhanced plantings. The second area is over between units 47 through 59. This is the area I was referencing behind Center Street, where we have the 85-foot buffer. And again, this is, we've added the post and rail fence to delineate this, as well as the conservation markers that we had previously discussed on this to delineate this open space and indicate, make it clear that this is open space. And then the last area is just behind 42 and 43, which again, we have the fence and the markers. So those are the only areas.
What is the sort of the logistical constraints of making them all 100 foot?
Well, there was kind of twofold. One is with the reduced buffer, we're able to still have a lot size, a marketable lot size, so that the buffer could be entirely in dedicated open space rather than having a portion of it on the lot. If we were to have to extend this buffer, you know, another 15 feet, we could, but we'd look to have that as part of the lot area, and it would have a reduced backyard. So I think that with the reduced area, we can still have more marketable lots and better protect the buffer vegetation.
Is it, with all of that open space up on the top of the plan, you can't swing everything up just 10 to 15 feet, or is that?
No, this is we actually just came the other way about 20 or 30 feet, because this is the area that the Conservation Commission wanted us to pull these drives down and down here to stay out of the buffer and still have a 30-foot backyard, so that they're not dealing with individual house NOIs in the future.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to our conversation about a buffer on or off the property. If they move those backyards closer to the wetlands, conservation then is going to have a concern about people utilizing the wetlands that are in their backyard, you know, the buffer in their backyard. So they've been adamant to pull it, much like you guys have been adamant about, you know, the buffer neighboring residents.
All right, and then in terms of the open space, the triangular portion up on the top there, is there any plans to sort of restore that to a natural condition?
There isn't right now, but that's not to say that it can't be. And that's, I think, depending on who is going to be the eventual owner or caretaker of this property on how this should be treated. If the Conservation Commission were to take over, they may want some tree plantings and things like that, which may be possible. It may be desirable in my mind, and somebody can tell me I'm wrong, but it may be desirable to have some of this left as grass and it be kind of a town kind of field open space near the lake. So we're certainly open to suggestions on that. But as of right now, there's no definitive plans for new plantings or anything like that.
What's there now?
It's largely a grassed open space here. I think there was a stockpile here. I believe that's the one that's being relocated. And then from about here on, it slopes down into the stormwater basin that's right here. So the stormwater basin is not within the open space. It's outside of the open space. I believe there are some swales in this area, but the remainder is just grassed area, grassland.
Oh, and then my last question, for the units, there's not many, but for the units that back up to each other, for example, units 82 and 77, 83 and 76, sort of in that middle section.
Yeah.
Is there any way to put trees in between?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that would be part of the actual lot development. Because again, we're showing kind of a rather large box on this as the house. And once this, there's a buyer for a lot, they pick a house, it will probably be much smaller than what's shown here. Then some associated landscape screening, perhaps they want fences, things like that can be incorporated.
What I'm concerned about is sort of, I think we might have discussed this previously. I still want a sort of a generic cookie cutter neighborhood. We have a couple of those in town now, and they just don't look good. So if there was a way, when we get close to wrapping things up, if you could provide us with specifics about that, the houses are going to be off center. They're not going to be just row after row of the same spot of the house. The trees are going to be this way. I really would like to give the neighborhood character to the extent that we can.
Okay.
And one thing I do note there, so the area Brian's talking about, it's labeled as wooded area to be preserved. Perhaps there's a condition in there that we wrote that area off before start of construction or something like that, to make sure it doesn't get, buzzsaw doesn't come through and clear it out.
Oh yes, absolutely. And we'll have some sedimentation barrier along here. So the limits of work would have to be staked before any tree clearing. And this area is to be preserved. So yeah, a condition to that effect would be perfectly appropriate.
Yeah, I think there's like 3 or 4 areas on the plan set that where the houses back into each other. So if you could take a look at that, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Brian, Phil, any questions?
Yeah, so I also echo the conversation about the buffer, and I'd like to have the applicant look at it again to try to get to that 100-foot buffer level. I understand the Conservation Board also has concerns there too, but you're looking for 103 on the yield plan, and you're looking for us to go over and above, and I think it's coming. When I look at it and I weigh it, to me it looks like you're trying to get to 103 houses by shortcutting buffers, which I prefer not to do. So I would also like to ask the applicant to relook at that, see if it's possible you know, even if you curl up the road a little bit on one side, get rid of those. I'm not sure how you're going to come about that, but that's certainly something I'm concerned about. Secondly, you mentioned the inclusionary housing and that you'd be looking for a special permit in the future. You also, I think I heard you say that the smaller houses, you submitted 2 sets of plans, the 2021 plans were the smaller ones. And I thought I heard you say that those would be for some of the smaller lots in the inclusionary housing. Is that what I heard tonight?
Right, that would be the intention. We have some different house styles, different sizes houses.
Well, I thought the idea with the inclusionary housing was that you couldn't tell the difference between the houses.
Well, be honest, I'm not an expert on that. I don't know if that's the exact definition, and I don't know if Jeff, if you would have anything to add on that. But I think, you know, they can vary.
Well, the idea behind that is if you drive into a development, you wouldn't know which one were the inclusionary houses and which ones weren't. But if you're purposely saying tonight that the smaller ones would be the inclusionary housing, to me, that doesn't sound like what we're trying to do here.
I just interject for a minute.
Yeah, please.
Jim, we've had this discussion many times, correct?
Yeah, well, yeah.
On many developments.
Yep.
Phil, I agree. The intent of inclusionary housing was within the same development is you should be able to drive down that development and not be able to tell from the outside what house is inclusionary and what house is not. I don't think they met that standard based on what was presented this evening. Jim, am I in the correct realm?
Well, I mean, it's up to the board's consideration. DHCD certainly looks to your guidance as to whether or not you have reviewed it thoroughly to determine whether or not it meets the standards, and it's of like kind of the
Like kind of quality.
of the market rate, certainly.
So,
And again,
Yes, absolutely.
would the applicant like to weigh in? I heard you.
yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I'm going to add is not all the small houses that we showed are inclusionary houses. That there are these smaller lots that are going to warrant these smaller houses as, you know, that's what fits there. So I don't think that just the smaller house is going to be indicative of something that's part of the inclusionary housing.
Okay, that goes to my third point, which loops back down to my first point, is that the smaller houses that could or could not be inclusionary houses, I don't think I want to see those on the buffer zone. I mean, that's why I'm asking you to go to the 100-foot buffer zone, because, I mean, you're talking about smaller lots. Well, where are the smaller lots? The smaller lots in
Along that buffer
usable
zone.
land is along the buffer that you're showing, right?
Right.
So to me that's against the spirit of what we're trying to do here. So I would really like you to take a look at those buffers, and it would really help this, in my mind, this plan set to get that to that 100 and look at it again, sharpen your pencil and try to get there, because you avoid a lot of issues with that. So I appreciate that. The next piece was the detention basin being, you said, smaller. I'm not familiar with the clay process that you have. I'd like you to submit, I don't know if you've done this already, to peer review, but I'd like you to get some additional background to the peer review on the clay piece of this, so that we can have peer review. I believe it's Frank in this case.
Yep. Yeah.
Frank,
So
thoroughly review it.
yeah. So Frank was hoping to be here tonight. He actually has a family medical emergency that he's not able to make it. I talked to him yesterday about it, and I expressed my some questions regarding that clay court, because I know Sean had recommended this, or at least we had some discussion after the last meeting about it. So he's certainly looking into it a little further, and I think at the next meeting we certainly could have a robust discussion with with him and John and the board about, what that really means for the long-term care of it and how to maintain it and all that.
Yeah, and just a quick background, I think that the clay core notion actually came from Frank, and what this is designed to do is prevent kind of horizontal migration of water within the basin, which could over time perhaps deteriorate the berm. Instead, force it down, because the clay is basically an impervious barrier. So it would force the water down and then flow into the aquifer. So that's all this is, and it's a fairly typical thing in many basins.
Are you building up the basins, the walls around it?
Yes.
You are. Okay, so I think I would like to hear Frank's take on all of this. Is he came from him? Is there a, I see your drawings there. Is there, in other cases we've had applicants submit equipment or something like that. Is there anything like that would be helpful for Frank to define what you're doing here, or does he know exactly what you're doing?
I don't want to speak for Frank. I believe he would know what we're doing here, but if he needs additional information, I'm sure he can, let us know what he needs, and we'll certainly get it to him.
Okay. The schools, your comment on schools, I see where you got the math, and I followed your statistics and your multiplication and all that. I would say with all these bedrooms though, I think I'd put a $5 bet on the fact you're probably gonna have more than 38 students coming out of this area when you're fully built. And I'll just leave that as a comment. I think that's what I have for tonight.
Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone else sort of addressed the questions that I had, obviously in terms of the number of students that could possibly come out of the development, the buffer zone, all of that. So I don't have any additional questions.
Okay. Liz, when I get, I'm gonna have a comment about the students. I may, in my discretion, ask for either pipe in based on your knowledge. Russ, do you have any comments? I saw the Russ had chimed in. I think.
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm the same way. I don't see, unless the way this project's designed, how he's gonna get changed from 75 or 85 in the entire front of this project to 100-foot buffer. Unless he moves the project, you have to redesign the whole thing.
Okay, with that, I echo a lot of what has already been said, but I'd like to be a little more specific. The buffer area impacts Center and South Main Street. And Jim, did you receive a call recently about someone from that area with the pool?
Yes, I did.
There's something, I'm gonna be kind here. We all live in this town, and obviously this is where we live. And something that's developed on Main Street that's referred to as Spafford Mountain. It is, correct me if I'm wrong, stockpile from Lakeview Estates,
It is, yep.
positioned on your property to be used at Bellingham Shores down the road, correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So they sort of commingled inadvertently, both projects. So the reason I bring up the impact of the buffer zone, Jim, what has happened with this woman?
Well, actually, Carrie's here on the line. I'm sure she could chime in a little bit if you like.
Sure,
Hi, can you guys hear me?
we certainly can.
Okay, hi, my name's Carrie. I live at 953 South Main Street. And so far, we have a lot of concerns. First of all, the 100-foot buffer,
Mhm.
that is a big concern of ours. And second of all, our pool has been damaged so far just because of the dirt that has been placed in that section off of right next door to my house on South Main.
Real quick,
And
John, do you mind zooming into behind lot 68? There you go.
so that's my house, right? That you see my name right there, Climola. So that circle, that's my pool. The liner is ruined. The filter is giving us problems. We vacuum it 3 to 4 times a week. I've dumped a ton of chemicals trying to keep it cleaned. I did get in contact with someone from Fafford who they did put, I'm sorry, what's the name of it? The grass, they sprayed the hydro seed, but it needs to be watered in order for it to grow and stick. We are still having problems. I contacted him today. I can't open my windows. It's disruptive, you know, it really is disruptive. But my concern is, okay, this is just them putting dirt in for further construction. So first of all, it's going to cost me, I already looked it up, it's going to cost me roughly $1,300 without hiring someone to fix my pool. Which with a pool that was fine, but if I get this pool fixed, what's going to say next year or whenever this project starts? What other damage is going to happen to my property? It's concerning. I mean, like I said, I can't open my windows. We can't sit outside on our porch. Once they start digging it up again and stuff, is this all going to happen again? Am I going to be stuck in my house? I mean, we're already stuck in our house because of what's going on in the world, but now I'm really stuck in my house. So I have a lot of concerns on what's going on.
Can I ask you a question, ma'am?
Yes,
What was it like last summer?
it was fine. Last summer, it was fine.
Okay. So the only thing that's changed is Bafford Mountain.
The dirt.
Okay.
Once the dirt started being, like I was sitting outside working and my computer was all dirt, like dust. And I could see the dust floating all in my backyard. And that's when I noticed my husband's like, Carrie, I have to keep vacuuming the pool. What's going on? And I said, well, I saw all this dust. And that's when it dawned on us. It was from all the dirt that's being dumped and moved.
And I will note that pile is outside of the 100-foot buffer that they're proposing. We asked for them to stake that 100-foot buffer out so that they stay well outside of it.
I drove by there this evening. It still looks like dirt. I don't see anything green on there right now.
Sean, I'm gonna take your screen share away real quick. I went by to take a quick look because Mr. Roloff had said it was all taken care of, so I wanted to make sure of that. And this is what it looks like right now.
Okay.
When was the hydro sheet put down?
The hydro seed was put down, I don't know, Jeff, if you have the date. It was at least a week
ago. Yeah.
And unfortunately, it just hasn't been watered. You can see it's just washing down the hill there.
There's no mat or anything, just spray.
Just spray.
So when the wind blows, we get the dirt.
Absolutely.
We don't like to complain, but
Ma'am,
I mean, what are we supposed to do?
Your quality of life is important to us. And we're here to represent you, so please do not be afraid to raise any concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Ron, you can have that screen back.
Anything else you want to say?
One other thing is, another concern of mine is in the future, if they do decide to do any, I don't know, but they might not have to blasting or anything of that sort. I do know I'd have concerns about once they do start construction, are we going to be safe, or if there's a bad rainstorm, am I going to get all this dirt and stuff flooded into my yard? I mean, we have those types of concerns, and we definitely are very concerned with the 25 feet of buffer that we'd be losing.
What I can tell you, and we certainly have not made a decision on the buffer, but if this was to move forward, we will have a construction management program that will address your concerns.
Okay.
And I would ask that you monitor our meetings and please voice your opinion if and when we get to the point of having construction management discussions to reduce the impact by neighbors. So this is something we are aware Speaking about the buffer, I want to tie into something that Phil mentioned. We're in a different world right now, and people are going to be moving away from the highly congested areas and trying to gain more open space. I think your numbers for students per household, I'll be very honest and to the point, I think they're upside down. You're building, large homes with multiple bedrooms. You're going to have more than one student per home. I think if and when this is built, it will be attractive for people to leave highly congested areas with no backyards to move out here. So I'm just wondering, how many total houses do we have that do not meet the 100-foot buffer? Are we looking at, 8, 9, or 10?
Yeah, currently, we have 11, 1, 2, 13, 14, 15 that don't have the full 100-foot buffer right now.
And again, I'll be very direct and to the point. 15 houses, the value of those houses is significant to me. But also, we live in a small town, and we have requirements, and that's why I want to reiterate what other members have said about trying to get those houses 100-foot buffer. Now, I also want to mention, going back to impact to the neighbors. Jim, was there an accident last Friday in the area adjacent to Center and South Main?
Fairly close to the site we just spoke about, yeah.
At that point, were they asked not to move any more dirt?
I'm not certain if they were asked to stop moving dirt.
Okay. Have you stopped moving materials for that location
I do know they have stopped
since the accident?
Yeah, I know they now have stopped. They're not moving dirt.
Okay. I think that area will probably have to be rehydroseeded. In regards to the drainage, I feel comfortable now, since you sort of have intertwined both projects. The drainage on Lakeview Estates, what iteration of drain are we looking at now down there, Jim?
Oh, I don't know. We've been, several iterations over the course of 5, 6 years.
And now it has to be redone, is that correct?
They are submitting a notice of intent, to adjust the drainage down there again.
And I know Brian had some comments, Phil had comments. We had to do a better job in regards to the basin. And I know it will be put off to the next meeting, but we are very concerned with the basin. I am very concerned with the 100-foot buffer. Also, you mentioned the triangle of open space that at one point you counted on Lakeview Estates, now you're counting it on this. It's been in both developments at one point or another, Jim?
Well, they utilize that triangle for infrastructure. So as you can see, the detention basin is now carved out of that triangle.
Okay.
There's also a sewer line that runs basically directly, I guess that's north-south. Yeah, essentially, somewhat, that's those are just paper streets, but it essentially follows, like I'm pointing at my screen, but that bisects the triangle basically. And that was moved as a fuel change for Lakeview Estate. So it's kind of really carves up that triangle there.
And that was clear cut, correct?
Yeah, right now the majority of it's just clear cut slope.
And it was used at one point for storage?
Yeah, there's still some piles towards the upper triangle part, or at least there was not too long ago.
And just a point of clarification, the sewer line, I have the as-built information and I can add it to this plan. It does follow this paper street very closely
Okay,
and down here. So it is down in this lower portion of the triangle lot. This is all open.
Yeah, that'd be good to add to that, or to the plan set.
Sure.
I am just one person on the board, but I would like you to think outside the box here on how to use that piece of property. Many years ago, Jim, it was used as like a community resource.
Yeah, I mean, Silver Lake was, that whole area was a community recreational area, much like across the lake now as a beach. That island was utilized. I know the area was heavily utilized at some point.
And that area is sloped, correct?
Oh yeah, it's a fairly steep slope. Yep.
So with some work on behalf of Stafford, that can be made into, let's say, some more, like an amphitheater,
Essentially, yeah.
or for the development of the town. So if you could just try to, think outside the box to see what we can do. Anything would be an improvement over what is there now. It will take many years for trees to develop, and somehow we can make that property useful for the town and the adjacent developments. I think it would be a positive. So those are my comments. I think I've echoed comments of the board. I'd like to open up to the public. If anyone has comments on what they've heard this evening.
The only other thing, I don't know if this is the right place to talk to, or if anyone has any suggestions who I should speak to,
We'll find out.
is about the pool. Because I really don't feel that we should be, I mean, we're gonna have to replace our pool and our filter. I mean, we're a little aggravated about this, so I don't know if I should take this offline and speak to somebody about this.
I would suggest you may want to take it offline, either talk to Jim or myself.
Okay, great.
And Jim can provide you with my number, or you can sit down and call Jim.
Okay.
I think offline would be the best avenue.
I
And
see.
I think based on what we just said, I think Stratford probably expects to hear from someone about this fairly soon.
Yes, and I will certainly mention it to them and bring that up to them and ask them to contact you if that's okay, Miss Clemiola.
Yes, it is. Yep, they can feel free to contact me.
Just real quick, we have Kristen has her hand raised.
Okay. Kristen?
Hi, my name is Kristen Moore. I live at 93 Silver Lake Road. I live across from the Lakeview Estates retention pond that you're sort of referring to.
I think we met before, man.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm well known across the town boards, unfortunately. So I just have a comment. I feel for the woman who spoke about her pool. I personally have had some flooding in my property, as you guys are well aware, due to poor stormwater management issues with this applicant. I am significantly concerned if the town approves another project by this applicant based on his past and current performance of the Lakeview Estate projects. I cannot see how this would go any better than what's currently happening now. In terms of the woman who spoke to her pool damage, I wish you good luck. As far as the flooding on my property, no repairs or attempts to repair my property by Mr. Fafford are attempted. So I wish you good luck, ma'am, but my concern is, does the town really want to do business with a developer that does not play nice with the community and really just pay attention to people's personal property and just the overall, I think, health of the ecosystem, including Silver Lake? So I'll stop there. I can go on for days, but I just wanted to comment that I have some real concerns about a future project by this particular applicant that clearly has no conscience as far as doing good business ethics. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And just, if I may ask, this has been a concern of yours for several years.
Yeah.
In addition to water, you also have at times a freezing road in front of your house.
I have water. Yeah, I mean, obviously the Silver Lake has been documented as flooded. There's water and sediment coming into my home. So in my yard, and obviously it's well documented into Silver Lake. So again, this has been going on. I've lived in the property for 4+ years since I've moved in. I've had flooding in my property 8 major times, and I have documentation of 16 other flooding incidents that have, obviously been on Silver Lake Road, and so on. So I would be very cautious to proceed from the town's perspective. I just don't see how this could change his behavior in the future.
I would encourage you to participate in future meetings.
Sure, no problem.
I mean, if I remember you correctly, I'm sure you will.
Of course, yes, this is my entertainment.
I just want to go back to Liz for a minute. Liz, I had spoken earlier about the fact that we may see an exodus from some areas out to Bellingham for people who want to have open space. You're in the industry. Is that feasible?
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, we're starting to see a lot of, I would say, couples my age in their early to late 30s, thinking about leaving the city. Maybe they have 1 or 2 kids. COVID really kind of pushed them over the edge. In previous generations, they probably would have left the city much earlier on in their life cycle. And, millennials have sort of held on a little bit longer to that urban lifestyle. So we're starting to see a lot of people looking for houses outside of the city, in, areas with good school districts and all of that. That's why the housing market is still quite hot. Despite everything that's happening. And, my personal opinion based on, my years in the industry is we'll probably continue to see people pushing further and further out towards 495 because there is, transit access to the city, more people working from home. It means there's sort of less need to be closer to the city as well. So I think you'll see some of those demographic shifts that were already going to take place among those older millennials, and COVID kind of is pushing that forward, and we're seeing that movement happen right now.
So you're going to have an addition for the millennials with 1 or 2 kids. A
Right.
lot of people may not be going back to offices, and also may be working out of their homes, and that may be another driver. In addition to COVID, they'll just realize, I'm not going to the office. So why do I have to live near the office and have this long commute? Let me move out to Bellingham, fresh air, clean water, good school system. So do you think their numbers could be down the road low?
I mean, I think their numbers could be low. I'm just looking at this MAPC study a little bit more carefully, and I think some of their data happens to be based off of multifamily housing development, because I think that's the point of or has been the point of contention with a lot of people in the past, that you build all these apartment buildings and we get hundreds of students. So I would need to look at the data more specifically, but I think this paper's addressing overall housing development, not 3 to 4 bedroom single family homes in a bedroom community.
Okay.
So, while the 0.37 student per household is the statewide average, it may not necessarily be as applicable to this development.
Thank you. Appreciate your input.
Thanks.
Anyone else in the public? Jim, what's our next step? Oh, I'm sorry, Brian.
I just want to say that I'm extremely disappointed, but not surprised to hear about the problem that the butters having with the stockpile of dirt next to our home. This is symptomatic of reckless and intentional or intentional indifference that we have seen happen time and again at the other nearby development. It's a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's do something, oh, we'll do it. They don't do it, or they have to do it. They plant it, but they don't water it. They don't come back and maintain it. And then there's this fallout, and then there is this response is, I'm not doing anything I don't have to do. And that's been the experience at the other development. And I hope that that experience, we won't experience that in this development. And I would strongly encourage the applicant to work with this impacted abutter before a single shovel has been in the ground. Work with the abutter and make it right and do the right thing, because it's really, really troubling to hear that it's already happening to the people that live near this yet to be permitted project.
Is it fair to say we all echo that?
Yes.
Yeah, the plaintiff should just be done.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we're here to review the plans set tonight, but we're also here to look at the construction process,
Mm-hmm.
the staging and all that. I also drove by that pile of dirt on the way up here today. And, you know, it's a bit of an eyesore too. Am I hearing that there was a accident involving trucks from this company, or was it a separate situation? Maybe the applicant would like to comment on that. Was there something involved with your vehicles? Is an accident on site, near site?
I honestly have no idea one way or the other. I don't know if Jeff Roloffs, do you know anything of that?
I haven't heard of anything, but that doesn't mean it's not. I'm not sure I would have heard about that, but I don't know. This is the first time I've heard anything about it.
Well, that's going to be the construction entrance. Is that correct?
In later phases, yes.
So
Not at the beginning though. And,
So
and,
what-
and in the phase one, this material is going to be, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but phase one is at the far end of the project, but this material is going to be used during the phase one activities. Is that right?
Phase 1 and 2. Yeah.
So, I mean, to be quite honest with you, it's kind of an eyesore driving by it now. You know, there's nothing there to keep everybody from seeing the site. It sounds like the dirt's causing a problem. Is there another alternative that you guys can come up with so that you don't have to see it driving up South Main Street? Doesn't cause problems to the existing neighbors now?
Well, if I could just speak to my understanding of the sort of the dust issues, this won't address your concerns related to the visibility issues. The hydro seeding was done recently. I heard you that you're concerned that they haven't been taking care of it enough so that it'll grow fast enough. I'm going to talk to them about that. I did talk to the field crew today. Their impression was that the dust that was being experienced over the last few days was actually not coming from the stockpiles, but from the temporary access road, which hasn't yet been stabilized. So they're going to get the hydro seeders out there tomorrow to take care of the construction roadway. But I am going to communicate all of these concerns to my client first thing tomorrow. We're going to be exploring what can be done to ensure that the stabilization takes effect as soon as possible. So if the hydro seeding that's on it now isn't having that effect, what else should they be considering? So With respect to the dust and the erosion aspects of it, just give me a little bit of time to work through that. With respect to the height and the visibility, I mean, I think the only alternative would be to lower it, but that's going to require expanding the footprint, right? So it's a trade-off of impacts there. And if you want us to look into that trade-off and review it with Jim and Don and maybe Ann Matthews, I doubt that it would involve any buffer zone work, but if you want us to explore that trade-off, then we can look into that. I don't know what.
Can I interject for a moment? We have a lot of concerns, and we're talking about phasing. And, you know, we're not there yet. We haven't even agreed on the number of houses. And what bothers me is, I'm going to keep calling it Fafford Mountain. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was it less expensive to put the dirt there than to haul it somewhere else?
Well, yes, I think that it would be, because then it's also going to be used as part of this project. So then you'd be trucking it back into this site or buying new or whatever, increasing truck traffic down the road.
It just seems to be consistent with your history in this town. And we have a neighbor that is concerned, and yet we haven't even put a shovel in the ground yet for this project. Brian, at one point, and I apologize for going on, but I think it's important for the town. Didn't you ask for Mr. Pafford to be here at one point with me?
I don't know if that was in the planning board meeting or is
Okay.
How long is the file supposed to remain?
Well, so what they're saying is it's going to be utilized for phase 1 and 2 of this project. So if you deny this project, it could stay there for decades.
If it was hazardous waste, would they encapsulate it?
No, yeah, I mean, if it was
Cover it, right?
Yeah.
Top it in,
right,
so it doesn't leach out when the rain gets through.
right. So that, yep, you could easily do that. Yep.
I guess, Mr. Roloff, you mentioned that you'd be putting a plan together. What's a reasonable time to come up with a plan? And
Well,
to get it into Jim's office, as far as the dust, the road, you mentioned the road needs to be finished up. You're gonna go into the office tomorrow and talk about it. When would be a reasonable time for you to send a memo to Jim with the actions that you're taking? Because I don't want to wait till the next planning board meeting for the action plan to be developed.
Well, the action plan's already been developed. They just didn't finish it. And what I was saying was that they hadn't yet hydroseeded the construction roadway. So the action plan was to get out there, get the erosion controls in, completely surrounding stockpile. That's been done. So there is an action plan that's in place. It's already been reviewed with Jim. So that's done. Hydroseeding that stockpile was part of the action plan. That's been done. I'm hearing you tonight questioning whether or not it needs to be done more, and better taken care of, or maybe additional measures. That's what I'm going to review with them.
Jeff, I think this is the problem, though. No action gets taken until we're able to bring an attorney to a planning board or zoning board meeting. I've sat there with Alex on site multiple times. I've sat there with Wellington on site multiple times. I met somebody Fafford on site one time, and we discussed what should be done. You're right. You sent in an action plan. It was a pile of material that would be fully stabilized immediately once you've done moving that material. I watched them after I met them on site with complaints of dust control and said, this needs to be stabilized right away. And they jumped on it. They jumped on it and they sprayed it. And then they went away and never came back. And we watched the hydro seed fall down onto the ground and wash away and wash down gradients. And it takes an act of the developer's attorney to make anything move. I call Angela often. You and I chat in between meetings, and this shouldn't be. There's no other development. We have multi-million-dollar developments all over town with large companies, much larger than yours, and there's no time where I have to talk to an attorney until I'm closing out easement documents and getting stuff done for town meeting. This is just poor construction practice over and over again.
On an existing project.
Well, on this one right here, right in front of us, and we haven't even, and the board hasn't even approved it yet.
So we've had action plans on Lakeview Estates. A lot of the board members here have been down there to look at the ice build up during the winter. I think you've heard from this board, you've heard from the town, and I should let you know, not many people in the town right now are participating via Zoom. I want to hear from the townspeople on this as we move forward. This is where we live. This is where we raise our kids. You are a small town, and we take pride in our town. And the history on one of your current development, as someone participating tonight has indicated, to be kind, is lacking. And we're working on, I don't know, the fifth retention area for Lakeview Estates.
Correct, yeah, or an additional one, yeah.
So I think, you know, you feel the flavor of the board. And Jim, I don't know where we go right now.
So, yeah.
I want to listen to Phil, and I want to get an action plan done.
If I mean, Mr.
Absolutely.
Chairman, if there was an action plan that was designed for this site, and there's things that you've already asked, I would like those in writing. I would like the applicant to explain why it hasn't happened in writing, what the action plan is to correct it. Is there, Mr. Roloff, do you know exactly, you said there was an action plan. Are you still on Zoom here?
I am, thank you. I will commit to providing an update to Jim tomorrow of the work that's been done and the additional work that we're proposing to do. But right now, the only additional work, as I understood it, was to hydro seed the driveway, which is scheduled to happen tomorrow. So I think.
Hold on, so you're missing one big component. We need to sit down with you about it.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. That's right. I'm going to discuss with them do you want to be part of that? Do you want that to be part of my interactions with Jim, or do you want us to handle that separately with the property?
I want you to.
I think that can be separately.
Okay.
But you know, there's things on the construction site that haven't happened yet.
It's only one.
Like watering the hill. If that needs to happen, and you agree that that needs to happen, I want that on an action plan. And if we need to water it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever best practices, I'd like that on an action plan with dates of when it's going to happen, so that next time we come in, we can say, hey, this project, they're making good faith efforts to work this project in this plan. I'm also concerned about other things, but I'm sticking to this plan. Right now, we've got a construction site that's causing problems, and we haven't even approved it yet.
And I'm committing to getting what you just asked for, to Jim Cupford tomorrow.
Tomorrow with dates of action plans and when
Yes.
things are going to be done?
Yep.
Okay, Jim, can you forward that to the board when you get that? Sure. Thank you.
So what's the next step?
You have one more member of the public who wishes to speak.
Absolutely.
Janice, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Janice Sarowski, 2 Canale Drive. I actually live on a Safford property. I've been there for just over 10 years now. And I just want to comment that it's not just the developments that they have poor quality of construction. My yard, I wasn't able to have grass for 3 to 4 years. They came back at the 1-year warranty, did some aeration, a little bit of seeding, but there was nothing growing. And over the years, as I've tried to plant, I find out why, because they did a minimal 2-inch layer of like topsoil, and everything under it is clay and rock. I've got boulders that line my half-acre lot that are the size between a softball and a basketball. And even up till this year I had a 55-gallon rusted out drum surface. every time we have frost heaves, every year I'm pulling out more boulders and more garbage and debris. So it's not just the developments that are poor quality and poor drainage, it's also the single family homes that are, you know, nearby in this property. So I just want to add that along with my concerns of seconding everyone's comments on here.
I'm sorry, where do you live down there?
2 Canally Drive, right off of Cross Street.
Is that part of the Lakeview development?
It is not. This was before Lakeview.
He has a lot of, Mr. Pepper has constructed a lot of houses around.
Oh, so that was another Fafford construction?
It was one of the first ones in the Silver Lake area. As they were starting the Silver Lake properties, they did 2 on Canally Drive. It's going to be right near the retention pond in the first phase and the utility corridor coming off Cross Street.
All right. Thank you.
We've driven by your house when we've had water concerns in your neighborhood.
Yes. Yes.
I don't have to tell you, please continue to participate in this. So Jim, anyone else from the public with their hand raised?
No, I think that's everyone.
Okay. What's your next step, Jim? Realistic.
Yep. So I do have a few notes real quick on the construction and phasing plan. If I can just run down real quick.
Absolutely.
So Sean, I know so we had talked about it briefly, and you're welcome to point it out to me on the plan set if I missed it. But so things like for construction purposes, if you get down that road, silt fence. I know we talked about it a while ago, wire back silt fence. That's something we learned from previous projects. I didn't see it on the detail, but if it's not, or if it is, great. But if not, it'll be great to add.
Yes,
it is in
and
the
I think-
draft slip.
Okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think I had not added that to the plan, but it is in the SWIP that we submitted. But I'll add it to the plan to make sure we're.
Definitely. I would recommend in the plan because that's typically, the contractor goes out there and he has that plan set, and that's his Bible there. So let's see, the construction entrance again. I think you already have it, but just to reiterate. Riprap entry points for all construction sites. Any lighting on there, I think the board would want to consider if you have to bring out lighting for, in the winter time, perhaps if you're working until, 5 o'clock and it's 4 o'clock and it's dark out. I think we would want at least an hours of when those lights shut off, as well as probably to ratchet up construction hours. Our bylaws are pretty lenient. And we're neighboring a lot of residents there, so that's certainly something perhaps the board may want to discuss at a later meeting.
Yeah, and just to point out, Jim, we did have construction hours in the I believe the soil management plan, but the environmental impact statement that we submitted, I think back in May. There was some discussion of that and restricting no construction on Sundays and things of that nature. Environmental analysis. Yeah, so the construction hours would be limited to 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, 9 to 6 on Saturdays, and no use of equipment on Sundays. If we need to do something different here, just let me know.
Okay. All right, and then let's see. So I think you heard from the board. They want you to look at those lots. You got 15 lots there. At the next meeting, certainly need to. I think they've been pretty blunt about what needs to get done there, or at least reviewed there. That triangle, I would be interested in talking to you a little bit more, and maybe we can talk offline about what could be. What could be the future of that open space. I think the board is correct. Some sort of restoration plan needs to be provided there. But I hear what you're saying, Sean, that it's there could be a lot of variables or opportunities there. So perhaps that's something that, I don't know, maybe we discuss in a condition format about what that might look like in the future.
Yeah.
Housing plans. So I know you brushed on the housing plans quickly. And I think we had talked about this previously, but I don't have it in my notes, is downspouts. All these houses are going to need direct infiltrators. That's what's proposed, right?
Correct. And we have a note on the drainage plan indicating that all the individual house lots will have to have their own infiltration systems, which would be incorporated in the final house design once the house is chosen.
Okay, perfect.
We do
'Cause
have
I
a
know
note.
that was an issue from the previous development that the building inspector caught later on. And then obviously, you know, I think certainly a good conversation we can have at the next meeting with Frank and BSC about that basin. And my apologies for not being there. You know, it's a medical emergency. Brian, I know you did have some questions about phasing at one point in the meeting or previous meeting, and I was looking at this phasing plan a little bit closer the other day, and Sean, I was interested in your thoughts on so the blue and the yellow. So the blue, I know the board had been concerned about going too far with each phase. And so I look at it and say the blue and the yellow are kind of larger phases. And I see there's a direct separation in terms of stormwater, or grading at least. And so in between essentially 9 and 10 in the blue. I don't know if that's something the board wants to consider, making those two separate phases. You know, we don't have to decide that now, obviously, but as you see there in between 9 and 10, you see how the grades, they start pointing differently, or as well as in the yellow, between 51 and 52 and 72, 73, I guess. It's kind of the same deal. I don't know if that's something the board wants to consider, but also in terms of, I know the board asked for us to look at language of a condition for building, when to authorize moving to the next phase. So Sean, maybe you and I can work in between now and the next meeting, some language that we could offer the board in terms of building permits and infrastructure. Because I know, you know, it's hard to say you're only gonna run a gas line from Cross Street to, you know, house 20, lot 26 or whatever it may be, and you might need to get to, say, 19 or something like that. So, you know, maybe if the infrastructure goes 2 phases while building permits go 1 phase, I don't know. It's something that I think the board wanted us to refine a little more, that I think we still need to work on.
You really want to tighten it up.
Right, exactly.
Can I ask a question? Sean?
Well, all I was just going to say is, yeah, I think it would be great for you and I to have even do a Zoom call like this for an hour next week or something like that to go through this. That'd be great.
I'd like to be direct to the point. What's the average house in here going to sell for?
I don't know. I'm not really up on the real estate values in town here.
Let's say, you know, $400,000 minimum.
But yeah, possibly nice. They do quality work. Yeah, it could be 450.
And how many lots are we talking about?
Well, right now we got what, 103,
103.
Question, 10, 12,
15.
or 15? So potential $6 million worth of revenue. A lot of money. I think you're trying to maximize this development for the benefit, obviously, of the developer. But we don't feel comfortable with the 100-foot buffers. I think the board is in agreement.
I'm not comfortable with it, looking at me.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
So I think we really, and I know we're talking about phasing and construction. We got to get down to a manageable number with the buffer.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, I've absolutely heard this board loud and clear with respect to that. So we will be looking at that and come back with a proposal.
Mr. Chairman, we mentioned the phasing. 5 phases, is that what I'm hearing? That's what we discussed before?
Yes.
5 phases, over 100 houses. That's a big different, there's a lot of different phase. I mean, that's only a few phases there. So, you know, I guess I'm going to ask the rest of the board, are you guys comfortable with only 5 phases on this? I think that Jim is going to meet with the applicants, but do we need more phases to this? Based upon history.
We may need 6 now,
But
correct?
what's going on here? This project alone.
Yeah, so I think there might be a reasonable approach for, was it 7? But, you know, I'd take a closer look, and Sean can take a look and see if there's, you know, reason for or against, and come back to the board. But I mean, I think 7 phases in this could be a good number to hold someone's feet to the fire and this kind of size.
And continuing my thought, Jim, this board member would like there to be a conservative, how do I phrase this? I would definitely like to see a robust plan, if I'm making that clear. I'd like to see that it's spelled out, that if we need to make a lot of language in the agreement, we need to make a lot of language in the agreement. But Sean, I think you and Jim can talk through it, but I'd like it to be a conservative plan as far as the town's concerned.
Phasing plan.
Phasing plan. Conservative phasing plan as far as the town's concerned.
And Shannon, I want to bear in mind, I apologize for interrupting Phil. You know, we're up to 7 phases. That's based on your current yield. We take 10 or 15 off that. It may be still maybe 7. But do not assume that as you plan your phasing, that this is the number of houses you're going to have. I think that's fair from the board. Is that, are we in agreement?
I would like them to come back with the buffer before we make that final decision. Because I mean, the buffer to me is a big thing, okay? I'll be there, okay? If you guys could fix the buffer and work through that, then that's a plus in this plan in my mind. I'd like to hear what the rest of the board thinks on this, but to me,
The buffer has to be addressed.
fixing the buffer needs to be done, okay? And then you're looking for a yield plan and then inclusionary housing and all this other stuff on top of that. But the buffer's, an important piece of this that we've talked about over and over and over again. And we've never absolutely said no, but we've all talked that it's very concerning. And we're still concerned about it. In this board, I won't speak for the rest of the board members, but in this board member, I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah, during this buffer stages, phasing stages, I don't know how many we end up with. I would like to see him not move to the next phase till it's 100% completed and everybody's concerns and complaints are all met.
Well, and again, I believe I've mentioned this before, and the intent of the phasing is for the roadway construction. We don't intend to just build phase 1, construct the 15 houses there, and go to phase 2. And I think that you need to have all the roadway infrastructure complete, the 2 points of access, and all that. As a town, I would think you would want that completed sooner rather than later, and then the houses can follow. That being said, the phases and the way that we've worded this and structured this is they can't move to a next phase until the previous phase is stable and stabilized. So there isn't erosion issues or dust issues and things like that. And then they can move on to the construction of the roadway and the infrastructure of the next phase. that the houses can come later.
Well, that still hasn't been agreed.
Yeah, and I think, Sean, that's what I was getting to, that I think we need to sit down and really ratchet up some language that might be agreeable, amenable to the board, because I think there's some disagreement there, and we need to hash that out.
Okay, all right, we'll talk. All right.
How much time will we need?
Well, so yeah, there's a number of things that you've been very clear to the applicant about that needs to be
Just say,
discussed.
this is not the first time we've been very clear.
Yep, yeah, understood.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
So obviously we need to continue to a date certain. It's up to the board. Obviously, we don't have a second meeting in August. Your next meetings are September 10th and September 24th.
Sean, what's viable for you?
Well, we're also waiting on the BSC comments from the last plan. So I don't know what, if any, changes will result just from their comments, aside from what we're talking about now. I would like to go to the 10th. I think we'll certainly have things to discuss at the 10th. At the very least, we certainly could get a revised layout and talk about this buffer, and Jim and I will have a chance to talk about some of these other things that we just talked about. So I think we can still have a productive discussion on the 10th.
Have a motion on the floor. I'll move to continue the hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I need to close the public hearing first?
No. We're not closing this yet.
Okay, I just want
I
to
don't
the
think.
public input. Excuse me.
Yeah.
We motion the floor to continue this to September 10th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion the floor. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you
We'll
very
see you
much.
on the 10th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now it's time to wake up Martin. Let's see if he's there.
Yes, I'm still here.
You're quick.
Very interesting to see. They say like you don't want to see how legislation is made. It's very interesting to see this process up close in detail.
Not pretty.
So Jim, are you going to let me share my screen here for the presentation?
Right now. So just so everyone's up to speed, I don't want to take too much of Martin's thunders because I'm sure he'll go over the process, but Bellingham has been working with Martin and MAPC for about a year and a half now to develop this hazard mitigation plan along with the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan. We did this in collaboration with Franklin in terms of outreach and discussion because obviously hazards and being vulnerable to the elements and devastation doesn't stop at town lines. So it was a long, robust process. Martin's done a lot of great work in getting this plan to where it is today. And today is just more of an overview from Martin as to where we are and get any feedback and input from those in the public and the board. And Martin, you should have the capabilities now.
Let me see if I can bring this up then. Okay, so see if this works. Okay, are folks seeing this slide now?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get rid of. How do I get rid of this? Oh, there it is. Sorry, I didn't want to minimize on my own screen the meeting. So thanks very much for making the time, and I will actually try to really expedite this presentation, being that it's so late in the evening and folks are probably generally a little familiar with this. So I'm going to go through the first few slides fairly quickly, just set context so we can get to some of the more specific slides for the plan. But I do want folks to be aware that this is a project under FEMA. It's part of a national program for cities and towns throughout the country to develop local hazard mitigation plans. The town has already developed one of these plans, which MAPC helped put together. It was approved by FEMA back in 2011. These plans do need to be renewed and updated. So that's what we're doing, updating your plan of 2011 to a brand new 2020 plan to meet all current conditions. And once you have that in place, it will be submitted to FEMA to update the process. This under FEMA, there's a lot of different kinds of hazard plans. This is a plan about natural hazards. So it's not anything to do with, say, homeland security, terrorism. It's not anything to do with things like more like human caused impacts, like things like storage of chemicals and chemical waste. There's other programs for that. It's also not an emergency response plan. You already have an emergency response plan called the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. The purpose of this plan is to take stock of what hazards the town faces in terms of hazards like flooding, high winds from different kinds of storms, winter storms and ice, but also events like possible brush fires, geologic hazards like earthquakes, landslides, extreme temperatures, both hot and cold, and drought. So it's a wide range of actions around natural hazards, and focus on what do you do in the community to reduce your vulnerability to these hazards. So you already have emergency response plans for what you do if you have a hazard. How do you respond to it? This is often called pre-disaster mitigation in FEMA's language, because it's the planning you do before a disaster happens to see how much you can do to make your community more resilient and less vulnerable to damages when various hazard events occur. And FEMA is trying to break this cycle of disaster, rebuild, disaster, rebuild. Actually, Bellingham doesn't have such extreme cases like this. This kind of thing happens more on the more extreme building and sites over and over again. But still, the idea is there to try to reduce your vulnerability and reduce the damages that would be caused by natural hazards. If anyone has any questions, if something's not clear, we'll have a little time at the end, but just let me know as you go along, okay? Jim, is everyone hearing me okay?
Oh yeah, loud and clear.
I can't tell on my end. Good. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview here. When we talk about hazard mitigation, that can be broken down into several kinds of activities that are actually quite different from each other. It's an umbrella term. And you see here a list. We've broken it into this sort of 6 categories. And prevention is critical, that first one, because that's things the town can do to prevent the hazard from actually happening in the first place. And that has to do with things like where you site your development with response to where there are hazard-prone areas. If you steer development away from known hazard areas, you prevent damages from happening in the first place, where you significantly reduce them. So when you hear talking about, you know, I just heard earlier tonight talking about buffer zones and all of that, and protecting certain areas, that plays into this kind of prevention. What we also have a lot of properties over the years that have been built up in areas that we now know are hazard zones. They maybe have since been mapped as FEMA flood zones or whatever, even long after these earlier developments were built, and they have to be considered as well. They are now perhaps in areas that are hazard prone, and so what can be done to protect those properties? Sometimes things like elevating properties, elevating the utilities and critical facilities within a property, things of that sort. Public education is part of this. The owners of properties, whether it's residences, businesses, large and small, they actually have a part to play in how they manage their own property in terms of how much vulnerability they may have to natural hazards. Natural resources protection, that's where I'm talking about things like, you know, having in place your floodplain overlay district, which you have, and then other measures, aquifer protection, watershed protection, letting Mother Nature do as much as you can for you to reduce the hazards to your built environment and to human and economic resources. Then number 5 can be a pretty big category in these plans, and that is structural projects. And those are usually drainage and infrastructure and stormwater types of projects to often solve existing problems where these structures may have been out of date by now, or they may be undersized, or as development has increased over years, some of the earlier designed facilities are no longer adequate for today's conditions. So projects that could actually upgrade some of your infrastructure, either replace it or enlarge it or upgrade it. And some of these projects, these are some of your capital projects that could be big dollar projects. One of the benefits of this plan, we'll talk about a little bit later, is that it opens the door to some potential FEMA grants that can pay for these kinds of projects in item number 5. And the last one is emergency services, to make sure that some of the key critical facilities you have in town that provide utility to your first responders, police, fire, public works facilities, that they themselves are protected, so that they will be able to continue to provide utility in protecting the rest of the population and the rest of the community. Oop, I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. I'm gonna go back. So this is just a quick sort of flow chart using a circular clockwise pattern rather than what you might often see in a flow chart as to the major steps in developing the plan. Spoiler alert, we're already now up to item 7 that you see in the left in yellow, second public meeting. So how we got here, we went through this process of identifying and mapping your hazards. I'll be showing you a few examples of inventorying and mapping the critical facilities in town, of assessing the risks and vulnerabilities to different facilities. And then we had a first public meeting back in March, which Jim graciously took over the facilitating of which, because it was on March 12th, the very last public meeting that happened before I know our agency shut down, not shut down, but changed to a complete close the office and work from home. That came the next day on the 13th. So that we eked that meeting out just in time as a regular in-person meeting. And that one focused on the other part of this project, which is the municipal vulnerability preparedness project, which is a kind of a companion to this hazard mitigation plan. Then we went ahead to step number 5 and reviewed the existing mitigation that you have in town to get a baseline of what your current conditions are. From that, identify gaps, identify needs for better mitigation, more mitigation, and that comes up with a list of recommended strategies. That's really the heart of this plan. We'll go into it and look at those in a minute. Now that we have all of those components of the plan together, up to steps 1 through 6, we're going through the final part of the process, having the second public meeting. And after this, after this meeting and any further revisions that might come into the plan as a result of review and comment, we'll be ready to do the very last step, which is submitting it to MEMA and FEMA. So we're really getting into the home stretch here, and having the plan before us, you can really see what the full range of options are for the town. So the steps involved that I just mentioned, one of the first was to identify and map where are different hazard areas in the town. And any one of these charts we could spend a long time on. We won't do that, but they're there if anyone wants to spend more time looking at them. There's a whole series of 9 maps that are on GIS. And so the town will be getting copies of these maps, but also if you could use them in your own GIS to integrate them with other mapping, you get the GIS shapefiles. This example here shows some of the flood zone areas in the various colors of blue and green, and also you'll see some like pale pink dots scattered through the map. Those were actually areas where there were flood damage claims made from the big flooding event of the spring of 2010. For those of you who may remember that, it's already 10 years ago now, but it was the 4th largest flooding event in history in the Upper Charles. And it was so big that it created a lot of damage, even in town, in properties that are not in the floodplains. So you can see kind of spread throughout the town. So we use that to make the point that it's not just about what's in a FEMA floodplain. There are potential damages that can happen in different parts of the town. We're also mapping through a different series of maps here, things like the earthquake potential and the other natural hazards. What are the wind speeds? What are the annual snowfall? Where are the areas that are subject to landslides, et cetera? Those are all mapped as part of that same map series that this one is an example of. The next thing, and this is critical with the local team, and I really didn't mention that, I really should give kudos to the local team, which is, your different department heads and staff from key departments here that Jim helped to pull together. You know, we had public works, we had conservation, we had a whole police, fire, building. We had, you know, all the major departments that have some aspect on regulating and managing the physical development or infrastructure in the town, and they contributed their local knowledge as to where do you actually have problematic areas. These would be localized flooding areas that wouldn't show up on the FEMA map, on a large-scale federal or state map. Only local knowledge would give you this. And you see this list here in some brief descriptions of what goes on some of these sites. These sites are also all mapped on that hazard map, so you can see the corresponding location. And so some of these sites become the focus of like your identified problem areas that then the plan will then in later stages come in and identify some steps that can be taken. Flooding is like the first, second, and third on the list. It's the most common and ubiquitous natural hazard in Bellingham and most of the towns in Eastern Mass. But all of the other categories of natural hazards are a concern to some degree as well. So the plan does also, and these are just a few quick graphics to illustrate, the plan does talk about extreme heat and also extreme cold. It talks about drought, which, by the way, you probably know, because we've been in at least a moderate drought now for a couple of months, and the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs just today declared that the entire state is in a level 2 drought, and we're a good number of inches in deficit of where we should be for precipitation from January. So we're kind of in a moderate drought here. And when you're in a moderate drought in August, you really are at that inflection point where if it continues this way into the fall, you could deepen the drought and really become very serious. If you get lucky and we start to have rains in the fall, we can work our way out of it. But at this point, it's anybody's guess as to, are we going to be going up or going down from the point we are now, which is already a moderate drought. Earthquake potential. This is a map across the Commonwealth that shows that based on the geologic formations and which ones are more prone to potentially have earthquake action. And the green area that Bellingham and Franklin and other towns around here in this southern, southeastern part of the state would be one of the lowest categories, which, you don't really have major earthquakes here, but you could have an earthquake. It wouldn't likely be a very high magnitude, but it's possible. There have been a few that are of a lower magnitude. And finally, extreme precipitation, which is something that we're looking at not only occurring now in these recent years, but with climate change and the projections being made, expecting more of this kind of extreme precipitation, which really poses a challenge for our stormwater drainage systems, which were designed for less rain to be coming down in a given hour or a given 5-hour period. And so that's going to continue to be a challenge for the community. Critical facilities were identified again with the local team, really identifying what are the critical facilities in town and where are they located. There's an inventory, a spreadsheet of each of these facilities. There were 66 that were identified, and then they're all mapped. And on this little map, it's hard to see them, but all the little green dots are various critical facilities. You can see they kind of cluster in 3 parts of town around the town. Middle of the town, then the more densely developed area way to the south, and then a little bit up north along the 495 corridor. These facilities are a little bit of apples and oranges. There's lots of things that fall within this rubric of critical. It certainly includes things like all of the town facilities that provide utility, like emergency response and fire and police and public works and that sort of thing. But then it also includes facilities that might require assistance, like schools, nursing homes, elderly housing, daycare, etc. And then infrastructure, such as pump stations, water or sewer pump stations, dams, wells, communication towers. So they're all on this list, they're all mapped out. The actual plan has a multi-page spreadsheet where these are all listed out. You can see the categories. And it also shows how these sites, these 66 sites, when they're located in different parts of the town, which areas of the town are they located, or are they, some of them located where there may be hazard areas. One of the analysis we did, and this is based on a computer model, so it's, don't take these numbers precisely, but the idea is to give a ballpark idea of under different scenarios, other hurricanes, of earthquakes, or of flooding, how much financial damage from building damage and business interruption could you expect? And this is based on using some hazard software that FEMA itself has developed called HAZUS, HAZMH, which stands for Hazards US Multi-Hazard. They started this out just being a flooding program originally, then they made multi-hazard by adding earthquake and hurricane components to it. We ran 2 scenarios for each category, kind of a medium to a high, category 2 and 4 hurricanes, magnitude 5 and 7 earthquakes, and 100-year or 500-year floods. And you can see the variation. Again, these aren't the exact numbers, they are projections, but they give you a relative ballpark, and you can also see, compared to each kind of hazard, which ones would actually potentially create the most financial damage. So with all of that analysis under our belt, understanding what the hazards are, where your critical facilities are, what's at risk in the community, the next thing we really focus on is, here we get to the plan, what are the mitigation strategies in the town? And before we talk about recommending anything new, we get a good feel for what you have in place already, because you have a lot of things in place already. The town's been living with many of these hazards for decades, centuries, and it's not as if you're starting from zero. So we kind of assess and put together a baseline of what you have already in place. And then that allows us to identify some gaps and some opportunities, some additional measures. And so the next 3 slides violate all my rules about not putting too many words on a PowerPoint slide. We're not going to read through all of these. I just want to, you certainly can get a copy of this and look at it at your leisure. It's actually a summary of what's in the plan in even more detail itself in the plan text. But it's to give you a feel for the breadth of the kinds of measures that are recommended here for update in your new 2020 plan that updates what you had from 2011. And the mitigation measures are organized by hazard categories. So this first group is around flooding. It's the largest group again. The first few of these are all some of those structural projects that could be drainage upgrades, et cetera, that key in on some of those very same issues you saw earlier listed as problem areas like Shore Drive, Rentham Road, High Street, Saddleback Hill, et cetera. But it's also not just construction or structural infrastructure projects. It's things that are more preventative, like open space protection, that helps prevent the amount of stormwater that's generated to begin with and runoff that's contributed into the system. One of the items I'd like to call out, the second from the last, because I thought a creative measure that the team put forward that I actually hadn't seen any other town. We've done this kind of work in many towns. They specifically wanted to call out protecting land for future stormwater facilities, given the idea that we're trying to emphasize more treating stormwater through green infrastructure, through infiltration, through rain gardens, but that takes land. And so if you can proactively identify where some strategic sites would be that would help you manage your stormwater in a more sustainable way in the future and preserve that land now, whether it's purchase, acquisition, easements, whatever the case may be, I thought that was quite a good idea. And in fact, when I work with other towns, I'm going to borrow from this idea from Bellingham and share it with some other towns as well. Revisions to regulations is another aspect of this. And I understand you actually are on the path towards revising your stormwater, but that's something that bylaw, which is a part of the larger MS4 permit, but that's another example. So there is an emphasis on a lot of these construction, these infrastructure projects, but that's not the whole story. It's a mix of structural and non-structural recommendations. I'm going to flip next just to give you a sense that there are a few measures for some of the other categories of hazards, for wildfire, for wind, for geologic. Some of these are hazards really that aren't all that severe in Bellingham or don't occur all that often, but they can occur, they do occur in some cases, so you need to at least consider them in the plan. And there are a few measures here that would help with that. Some of them are regulatory, some of them are more assessments, like building assessments of where there are vulnerabilities and are there anything you can do. And some of them, if I flip to the final list, winter and drought, some of them are public education oriented as well. And so there's a full range of mitigation measures. These are all the recommendations of the plan. This is really the meat of the plan, the heart of the plan. And these are spelled out. And in the plan itself, for each of these measures you see listed here, it provides a recommended time frame. It provides an estimated cost. And it gives, it identifies which local or other agency would be the lead in implementing it. And it also gives an overall priority that the team gave to these measures as high, medium, or low, qualitative priority for all of these measures, because everything can't be a high priority. So the plan itself has a more full listing with all of those attributes for each of these measures. So I'm actually going to stop it there. I'll just mention that, because this would be repetitive, that you also did work on the MVP project. Jim mentioned that the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Project. I consider it to be a companion to what we're doing with this hazard mitigation plan. The main difference is that the MVP gives you the opportunity to look more forward into how these impacts may be different in the future with climate change, whereas the hazard mitigation plan is a little bit more based on your assessing your hazards based on the historic record of, how many floods you had and where has it flooded in the past, et cetera, et cetera. The MVP marries nicely with that because it kind of pivots and looks forward and say, well, how can some of these hazards be continuing and maybe even increasing in the future, increasing in intensity and frequency, et cetera. So the two together, I think, marry up nicely. And this was also, as Jim mentioned, a project that was conducted jointly with the town of Franklin. Again, from my perspective, kudos for the two towns to work together and think outside the box a little bit and work together. So with that, I'm just going to flip the head of these because there's a list here, but this is repetitive. I'll just flip to this slide here. These were some measures that came out of the MVP workshop that were Bellingham specific. Most of the measures, the two towns were together on the workshop and came up with kind of a joint list of projects and ideas that affected both towns. But there were a few items we pulled out from the long list of measures from that workshop that were Bellingham specific. So looking at here, things about, coordinating with schools, DPW building, beaver management issues, renovations, senior center, flooding on one of the sites we talk about in the hazard plan, flooding on Rentham Road. So some of these measures are actually reflected in the hazard mitigation plan directly too. So there's definitely correspondence between the two. So the last slide basically says, where do we go from here? We are 7 of 8 on that flow chart. So after we finalize this plan, if there are any comments that we received, finalize this plan, it will go through a review and approval process with a couple of different agencies. The hazard mitigation plan will be reviewed in 2 stages. First, what you see in blue here, MEMA, the Mass Emergency Management Agency, will review it. If they have any comments, they'll let us know and we'll respond to those. They'll in turn pass to FEMA, who will review it as well. And again, if they have any comments, we'll address those. Once FEMA is satisfied that the content of the plan meets all of their requirements, and they have some very specific requirements that are literally in the Code of Federal Regulations. And like a checklist, once you've checked all the boxes and they said the plan is good, they'll issue the town a formal notice of approval pending adoption. It means the plan can be approved, but we just want you to do one more thing, and that is to have the municipal leadership, the Board of Selectmen, to vote to officially adopt the plan. So there's a 1-page certificate of adoption that's actually in the appendix of the plan that would then get activated, voted on, just to say that we hereby adopt the plan. Once the plan's been adopted, FEMA will then issue you your plan approval. So it's a formal letter that comes to the town. It will be in effect for 5 years. And during that 5-year period, the town will then become eligible for these FEMA mitigation grants, which can pay for some of these kind of drainage infrastructure projects we talk about. These mitigation grants, some of them can be pretty big dollar grants. I mean, they're 10s, if not 6 figures in many cases. So it's something that's worth considering, that having this plan done and approved by FEMA unlocks the potential of those grants. You still have to apply for them. It's still a competitive grant, but you can't even apply for them unless you have a plan done. So this opens up as a potential line of additional financing for the town for some of these larger ticket projects. Likewise, the last 2 bullets, the parallel process here for the state through the MVP project, which is a state-run project, through Energy and Environmental Affairs, is that they will then designate the town as an MVP community, which then unlocks a state grant program called the MVP Action Grants, which likewise can fund implementation projects. Some of the same ones could potentially go from one or the other of these 2. So you'll have 2 lines of grants, one federal and the other state, that will open up and be available to you once the final plans have been submitted and approved by the agencies. And that will be our next and final step once we're done with this draft. And I think I'll just turn it back to Jim to see if there's any questions. And I'll just say that you may have seen this slide. I think I had this in the last. Those of you who were at the last meeting, my final question is usually, what's wrong with this picture? Hint, there's more than one thing. wrong with this picture. But maybe it's late for us to think about that.
But yeah, thank you, Martin. That was
Very
great.
well done.
Yeah. So, do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns?
I think it was well presented.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. No, I think you were really comprehensive there, Martin. I think if you want, we could. We have it posted online already on the planning board's website. Leave it up for maybe a week. Does that suffice, or do we need?
I think it's fine, Jim. There's no particular requirement here in terms of that. It's just that be made available, for review. But there's no. It's one thing that FEMA is not prescriptive about. They're prescriptive about almost everything else. But whatever you deem is fine.
Okay, so maybe if you want to check back in with me next Friday, I'll let you know if I receive any additional comments or questions or anything.
That's right. And I would add that, the team members themselves who contributed so much in, they're welcome to make sure I got everything right. Like I took a lot of their input and data and put it in the plan. If some of them may want to, especially just that list of recommendations at the back,
Okay.
might want to just double check that we got all of those kind of the way they intended them to be. And for instance, we went through the same process in Franklin, and one of the members said, you know what, on second thought, this measure about new generators, we said was medium, I think it should be high. So this is still a draft. We can still make those little tweaks if need be. Good. And Jim, if you would send me that link at some point, maybe tomorrow, doesn't have to be tonight, and I'll put that in the notice that we have.
Yeah, excellent. Yep, yeah, it's right on the planning board website. But I'll send you over the link. Yeah, tomorrow morning.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time, and I hope I didn't keep you too long.
No, thank you. Yeah. And if I may have my screen back, that'd be great.
Oh, do I have to stop share? Yeah, stop share. There you go. Right.
All right. Thank you, Martin. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night now. Have a long trip home.
Jim, I'm assuming we're going to general business.
Yeah, we have a few things there. If you like, I can go ahead and run down those. So first up,
While he's doing that, can I ask if we could just review, if we haven't done it already, July 9th and July 25th minutes? So we can include those. But go ahead.
In addition to those minutes, we have two items to review. First off is Amy Sutherland, our planning coordinator's contract. This is our standard contract that we use for the coordinator. So, as I typically do, you better sign this because I need it. So, thank you. If you make a motion to approve or sign.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract.
Make a motion by Dennis, seconded by.
Okay.
All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. And another document, the decommissioning agreement. So this is 186 Maple Street. So just a quick update with them. 186 Maple Street, that's the solar development that's pending. With that, once they pull the building permit for the solar, as you've heard me say a number of times, the definitive subdivision is withdrawn. So as part of that, there is a condition for a decommissioning agreement. While they haven't pulled the building permit for the solar, they have worked towards all the other conditions, which is promising to see. They've submitted, there was an agreed upon number during our process of $142,000. That decommissioning, if you recall, this agreement is for if 20 years from now, the solar development goes belly up and walks away, and we're stuck there with an abandoned solar site. We can use this bond to clean up the site. So it's $142,000. They have a decommissioning bond in place and executed already. So actually, I just need a motion for the chairman to sign.
Second.
This motion on the floor, the chairman to sign the decommissioning agreement with Maple Street. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
And then just, these are the minutes, actually of just the 9th I have for signature, I don't have the 25th.
And we all had a chance to review the minutes for July 9th and July 25th.
I move to accept the July.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's a motion on the floor to accept the minutes from July 9th and July 25th. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
And then lastly, I have here, not on the agenda, but a discussion point of schedule. You know, we're moving right along here. We're not having the second meeting in August. There is an issue with the second meeting in October because we have early registration, so they actually need this room. So I was going to propose, since we are in this kind of unique circumstance of having in-person meetings the first meeting of the month, and then reviewing each month to see if a online Zoom meeting would be warranted for the second meeting.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, as of right now, the agenda is a little bit light. I mean, we got big projects, but the agenda is somewhat light. It could be, you know, once a month. If we do get inundated with projects, obviously we would need to ramp back up. But I think this could be, you know, an opportunity. And at bare minimum, it would be September, October, and we could revisit it. Well, actually, no, November is Thanksgiving, so it's really, we're talking September, I guess.
We try to schedule like the meeting like tonight, we get all, you know, tons of paper, tons of blueprints to look at, stuff like that for, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
I just stuff on them.
Like a minute and more administrative stuff we could do with
Well,
live Zoom.
the presentation, the last presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could.
Could have been done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yep. That way you could turn off your screen. And that's why you turn off your screen and watch the song. But yeah, I mean, if that's what, if the board's okay with that, then I could.
I think it's a great idea. Okay. Anyone else?
Like, what you mean?
Liz?
Sounds good to me.
Russ?
Russ is on the beach now.
Okay.
He made the whole hearing.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
I need to sign the.
I have contract, I need minutes and decommissioning.
The decommissioning?
I'll bring it to you. Got minutes? Decommissioning. There you go. And that's all I have.
I move to close.
When you say goodnight, Bellingham?
Again, were you here for speak to the board?
No, I was here.
Oh, okay.
Jim, one thing further, for wrapping up, when we do administrative stuff, you look into the viability of seeing if we can have signature stamps.
Yep. Yeah, I could definitely look into that. I meant to do that already.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
Meeting's closed.
Thank you, Eric.
We have to take much of a adjourn.
I did, we never voted on it.
Vote to adjourn.
Second.
All approved it. Okay.